but to stay the course. We have to make the necessary adjustments in the next year to prepare the country for this unprecedented shock from COVID-19, while ensuring we stay the course in helping those people who we set out on this journey to help, because they lost a decade, because they have savings that were completely lost, that their quality of life was 40% lower than it was 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And as a result of it, that counter-cyclical policy, therefore, of this government, while managing the realities of the pandemic, that we could have as much, we have 41,000 people over the age of 70 living in this country. Then we have others, as I said, who may have chronic underlying conditions in the public sector, in the private sector. So that comfortably, I would expect that almost about 60% of us will be carrying the weight, when as much as 40% of Barbados will require to remain home in the immediate future. This is without prejudice, sir, that if the Minister of Health advises me that the Chief Medical Officer has advised him that we have to move to different stages, particularly stage 3, which is the ultimate, it may even mean more limited movement and more limited activity for a period of time in this country, in order to, what they say, to flatten the curve, in order to be able to make sure that we can manage the process and to keep our ultimate aim is to allow Barbadians to recover as quickly as possible from this virulent virus. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is against that background and these adverse forces, which if left unchecked will devastate our society and economy and will erode all of the gains, as I said, of the last 22 months, put us back fully behind the line, not even at the start of the line if we don't do it properly. In a small and open economy such as ours, these counter-cyclical measures have to be carefully designed to have the biggest possible impact on jobs and on growth, and the least possible impact on reserves, even though we have a healthy buffer, and the least possible impact equally on our fiscal position. And what do I mean by that? We cannot spend money that will continue to be a drag on government's budget as recurring expenditure. Can't do it. And that was a mistake that the last government made. In 2008 to 2009, instead of having counter-cyclical measures that were one-off expenditure, they then spent money on recurring expenditure, holding employment, holding all kinds of things. But it meant that even when you were getting around to turning the corner, they had to continue spending that money because they put it in the wrong place, in the wrong structure, with the wrong approach. And therefore, the cumulative deficits, the current account fiscal deficits in particular, is what killed us. 10 years, that's the point that the member for Christchurch East Central made in his seminal article. And this government will not make the same mistake with the future of this country, because we appreciate and understand that the people of Barbados have given us their trust and confidence to take them as far away from where they were when they made that judgment to vote for us. It is not ours to determine the weather within which we function, but it is ours to guarantee the posture and actions that we take when that weather presents itself. Accordingly, my government has looked to see where we can find the fiscal space, and the first thing that we needed to do was to approach the International Monetary Fund to tell them that we no longer can run a 6% primary surplus anymore. Not with the level of suffering that is going to ensue or the implosion on our revenues that we are likely to see. And that, quite frankly, in simple language for my constituents and the constituents of others in here, you can lose weight at £6 a week. You can lose weight at £4 a week. You can lose weight at £3 a week. You can lose weight at £2 a week. But whatever done, you're still losing weight. And what is the analogy that I'm referring to? That you can pay down your debt running a 6% primary surplus, which will come down faster, but you can still pay it down at 4. You can still pay it down at 3. You can still pay it down at 2. And what does each number mean? 6% of GDP. Every 1% of GDP is roughly about 110 million Barbados dollars. So that is the room that we want to make up for the fact that we will lose the level of revenue from taxation that I referred to earlier. But equally, we must also now spend money. So it's a double whammy. You're losing revenue and you're spending additional money that you have not intended to spend when this honorable chamber reviewed these honorable estimates in this house. I spoke to the Minister of Finance from Jamaica today, and he and I both reflected that I don't think we will ever see supplementaries coming as early in the fiscal year as we will now see them. You typically would not expect to see a supplementary before September, October. But we have now to do it. And it is against this background, therefore, that I want to share with you our thoughts. I told you earlier that in discussions with the International Monetary Fund, we've told them that we are prepared to adjust our BERT program to be able to see how we can get greater room. I think we have an initial understanding. No, I think we have an initial understanding that will see us move from 6% to a 3% primary surplus in the first instance, based on the 50% reduction in tourism arrivals, which is the moderate scenario. I've placed this house just now, as well as my team, as well as the International Monetary Fund, that it is looking more and more like the severe scenario and not the moderate. The severe scenario will probably see us go back to reduce even below the 3% to about 2%. But it is too early for us to talk about that. We are going to work in the next 3 months to 6 months on the basis of the moderate scenario until the data comes in. And if we have to adjust, there is an agreement on all sides that we will share and move appropriately to suit. What does that effectively mean? That this gives us the additional fiscal space. That even if we lose $240 million in taxation, tax revenue, that we are hoping to be able still to spend about $150 million over the course of the next 6 to 9 months to be able, and longer because some of the capital projects will go longer than that, but to be able to stabilize and to create opportunities for our people. If the lady who is the waiter or the housekeeper cannot work in a hotel because the tourists are not coming, and she has children, can we find a job for her children's father in construction? Or she may have done tiling before. As I know many a woman who have gone to skills training and done tiling in this country and done welding and done other things. And that more and more you are seeing women and men in the construction industry in Barbados, and competently so as well. So the government would want, first and foremost, in that extra space that we are getting, which is roughly about 350 million, to be able, remember we said that the tax revenue is going to be anywhere between 157 to 240 million dollars in loss, but we want to be able to spend about 150 million dollars over the course of the period of time. And Mr. Speaker, against that background, we also indicated to the International Monetary Fund that we would welcome, as I said, the enhancement of our EFF, the augmentation of our enhanced fund facility by another 200 million Barbados dollars. Interestingly enough, the Minister in the Ministry of Economic Affairs, member for St. Michael South Central, and myself met with the Inter-American Development Bank today with other Caribbean countries and with the president of the bank, and they understand that this, and the president of the Caribbean Development Bank, and they all understand that this is a very difficult moment for the region and that there is need for new policies that hitherto have not existed, and that we need to be able to craft them, because this is like nothing we have ever seen. Indeed, the president, in his wrap-up this afternoon, the president of the Inter-American Development Bank started his wrap-up this evening by saying, "We have never trained for this." It was a simple statement, but a stark and riveting statement that I will never forget. Similarly, when we met with the International Monetary Fund in conference call on Monday as a region as well, and I met with my colleagues on Sunday evening to prepare for that meeting, we are clear that there are some who need to draw down on the rapid facilities that the IMF have, but that we are saying also to them and to the development banks, we are going to have to go further than what exists in order to be able to fill the gap. Indeed, there is a fund that the IMF established, the Catastrophe Containment and Relief Trust, which was established initially for the Haitians after the earthquake, and then was morphed in to being the unit used to be able to help African countries after the outbreak of Ebola. We have said to the International Monetary Fund, and writing to them as well, to represent as chairman of CARICOM, that we need to be able to create new facilities for this region, recognizing the critical vulnerabilities that we face from climate crisis, the facing of this pandemic, the high debt, and the absolute low growth, and then the security-related issues. Indeed, colleagues may remember that were it not for the pandemic, we would have been having a major regional consultation between the governments of the community, Caribbean community, and civil society in Trinidad in April, in order for us to be able to treat violence as a public health disorder. Little did we know that there was another public health disorder that would displace it. We also feel that in the same way that the IMF reviewed the SDR quotas in 2008, 2009 with the financial crisis, that there may be a need to review them, especially for small developing countries like ourselves that are effectively at the front line in every real sense of these crises. And we have also represented generally to all that while the IMF is a lender of last resort, and therefore we can understand insulating them, we may have to start thinking outside of the box and looking at the restructuring of debt, not just for commercial banks and non-financial institutions, but also for development banks, recognizing that development banks were not created when the world had its Great Depression. They were not around at that time. And that for the most part, since the creation of development banks, the world has functioned in a relatively stable economy, even with the oil crisis, even with the financial crisis. But what we see now has no proper parallel. In the last 80 years, 75 years if we take the departure point from the Bretton Woods institutions and the United Nations, there's been no similar parallel. And therefore we have to think outside of the box, because mankind will pay what is essential first, and that what we risk is disorderly bankruptcies if we are not prepared to have orderly restructuring of debt. And I say so coming from a country that has just come through an orderly restructuring of our domestic and external debt. And for the record, in almost every instance, all the institutions who face restructuring faced a year of losses only to return to a year of profits under this government. I say that for what it is worth. Mr. Speaker, sir, accordingly, over the next 12 months, we will use the additional fiscal space to increase, first and foremost, health expenditure. Even before COVID-19, sir, my government, at the end of December, early January, acknowledged a request from the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and the polyclinics of the Ministry of Health that, having not had the replacement or the refurbishment of equipment in any major way for the last 10 years, that they needed an injection of capital to be able to purchase new equipment for the hospital to function well, from autoclaves to ventilators to x-ray machines to monitors to all kinds of things. And we therefore agreed that the Queen Elizabeth Hospital would be supported in a loan of $30 million to be able to purchase additional critical equipment before COVID-19. And that equally, the polyclinics would receive $10 million in order to be able to upgrade their equipment as well. The regrettable aspect of this is that obviously COVID-19 has intervened, and beyond our commitment, which we are not deviating from, to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and to the polyclinics, there is additional expenditure that we have now urgently to face to enhance our hospital capacity. One, Mr. Speaker, this House voted last week for the sum of $8.8 million to be able to buy supplies, to purchase supplies and equipment and beds to prepare us for ramping up our capacity to meet the pandemic. In addition, we have advised the Barbados Drug Service last week, Monday, 10 days, 12 days ago, that they were to start the process of ordering and keeping in stock 6 months of pharmaceuticals across the board for the Barbados Drug Service, for the private pharmacies, and for the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Accordingly, before we rise at the end of this fiscal year, an additional supplementary will come. Some of it will be taken money that they will use next year, and some of it will be additional funds. But the Barbados Drug Service will need $7.8 million for itself. The private pharmacies bill, for which they will be reimbursed, is about $5 million. And they will spend just about $17 million for the Queen Elizabeth Hospital to be able to ramp up the acquisition of the medicines, the pharmaceuticals. And why are we doing this? Because with borders closing, we have now a more difficult environment within which to manage supply and logistics. And indeed, one of my greatest concerns is that we get the equipment that we have ordered on time, because even though we have ordered equipment and have paid, in some instances, we are being told now that it is being held up because of the woeful circumstances that they are facing in other parts of the world that are affected equally by this pandemic. This is not easy, but I give this House the assurance that we will not stop until we can find a way, even if it means in certain circumstances that we have to charter planes or ships in order to bring what we need in terms of vital supplies. I think we have already assured the country that we have a good stock of food supply, and therefore that is not an issue. Indeed, while others saw Barbadians as hoarding recently, I actually saw it differently. And I told the others this. I saw it as Barbadians listening, recognizing that this is not short term and that they're going to batten down, and they therefore went to the supermarkets to get what they need to batten down, because we have told them that prepare yourself and get ready, particularly for the older members among you. And while I'm at this, let me just say tangentially that I need everybody to listen to these things, and not just some. There are some younger people, I'm told, who still believe that it is time to do things that they shouldn't be doing in terms of liming and drinking and things on the ground. Sounds great. But at the end of the day, when a person drinks a lot, then the inhibitions go, and next thing you know, the social distancing, as they call it nowadays, keeping your distance, standing away from people, all of that goes through the window. And we start then to put other people at risk. And we really have to get everybody in this country talking to everybody else to let everybody know that we are as strong as the weakest among us. But coming back to the health expenditure, so that amount of money will be brought forward in order to align with the procurement. We anticipate that it may not be enough in the long run if it goes beyond 6 months, and therefore what is in next year's estimates for the drug service may have to be kept in full, given the fact that we really don't know how long this will last. Mr. Speaker, sir, Harrison's Point, the facility that we are doing there, is going to come in at just under $20 million. But that facility, Mr. Speaker, will give us 38 primary critical care beds, and about another 30 to 40, and we will know tomorrow how many of the secondary care beds when we visit there tomorrow with the doctors. The primary critical care facility is coming along nicely. We are waiting for the equipment, as I said. But in addition to that, we planned also to stand up the Barbados Defense Force Field Hospital, which has 40 primary care critical beds as well. And therefore, we are already starting out with the Enmore facility with the 6 beds, the Barbados Defense Force critical care facility with the 40 beds, and that we have now decided will be located also at Harrison's Point, but we will leave one tent where it is until such time as the Harrison's Point facility is finished in 2 to 3 weeks' time. In addition to that, therefore, we will have the equivalent of 78 and 6, 84 primary care critical beds, and we will have just about 40 secondary critical care beds. At Harrison's Point alone, we have 120 quarantine beds. Between the St. Lucie District Hospital and the Elaine Canterbury Center, I'm told that we have another 30 quarantine beds. And at Paragon, Mr. Speaker, we have just about 270 quarantine beds as well, and a temporary isolation facility for persons who are mild with respect to the COVID-19 virus. Mr. Speaker, therefore, that $20 million at Harrison's Point and the $8.8 million with respect to the supplementary voted for equipment and supplies in here last week, in addition to some of the $30 million that we're spending at the QEH and the polyclinics, another $10 million will help us be able to meet these health crises in a far better way than we are at this point in time. Our difficulty to manage the logistics of it, which we are literally doing hour by hour by hour, and I've given you the commitment of what we will do if necessary. But supply is as critical because all of us are watching what is being said in the United States of America and other Western European countries with respect to access to equipment. In addition to this, Mr. Speaker, we will also implement a household survival program that will be $20 million immediately, consisting of 3 initiatives. Consisting of a number of initiatives. 1, we will support the likely increase in demand for the services of the Welfare Department as a result of COVID-19, and immediately announce here an increase of 40% in all rates and fees paid by the Welfare Department to its clientele that it services on an annual basis. Mr. Speaker, this government in 2018 increased the Welfare Department's vote by $5 million on top of the $15 million that it was then getting for a number of years. The increase that this is likely to cost us is just under $10 million, and therefore you will see an additional amount being supplied to the Welfare Department to help it be able to deal with the increase in fees, which has been regrettably, and grants and payments made to its client class that has not happened for a while. But there is another $10 million, Mr. Speaker, that we will be using. Barbadians would have heard me on the 2nd of January talk about the need for us to identify the 650 most vulnerable families. We have now agreed to increase that number to 1,500 vulnerable families, made up not only of those provided for by the Welfare Department, but also some of those who the Household Mitigation Unit would have identified who would have lost their jobs in the public service over the course of the last year as we sought to stabilize this country. Mr. Speaker, the amount is not a large amount, but it is an amount that is still intended to help people, and is larger than the initial welfare grants. The amount will be $600 per month. $600 per month times 1,500 families works out to $900,000 a month, and it will allow them to be able to literally be able to feed their families. These funds must be the subject of urgent action. But we're not stopping there, Mr. Speaker. 2 days ago, I met with the private sector and the labor movement in this country. I met, Mr. Speaker, from hoteliers to taxi men, from PSV operators and vendors to supermarket owners and other major titans in the commercial and retail and hotel sector in this country, and manufacturing. I said to them then something that I will repeat now, and mercifully we have the first injection to get it off the ground, and the account was opened today, I believe, at First Caribbean, and the public service announcements will go out shortly. We are formally launching the Barbados Adopt Our Families program, Mr. Speaker, because we believe that a country that knows what it is to carry each other cannot now watch others suffer in this environment. And to that extent, separate from those who can afford to hire somebody to help around the house or to do other things that they can because they're earning better than most, I am directly appealing to the people of this country, particularly those earning above $100,000 in Barbados, and those companies who can afford it, to contribute to the Barbados Adopt Our Families program that will be chaired by the Director of Finance and Economic Affairs, and will have other public servant representatives, not the political class, being able to manage that fund to make sure that we can reach as many Barbadian families as possible. Against that background, I'm happy to announce that the Massey Foundation has already agreed to seed that fund with the sum of $250,000 immediately in the first instance. And if we think about it, I am told by my officials that there are over 5,200 people who declare and pay taxes as earning above that amount. If we can get another 1,500 or 2,000 people donating $600 or $1,200 a month, or for those earning under $100,000 but have a little savings, $300 or $400 a month for each of the next 3 to 6 months, then I believe, Mr. Speaker, we can move forward as one Barbados, arm in arm, holding each other up and making sure that no one will be allowed to go under the water during this crisis that we did not start. And may I say that the mood of charity is very much out there. I really want, and I got the permission to do it this afternoon, But I really want from this chamber to salute a Barbadian who in everything that she has done has exemplified excellence, has carried our name to the highest points in the world, and who for young Barbadians is truly a hero. And I refer to Robin Rihanna Fenty, who, in spite of the fact that she's earning money, understood where she has come from and has continued to commit herself to helping the most vulnerable across the world, but in particular in the country of her birth. I'm happy to report to the nation that I spoke to her earlier this week, and that on her own initiative, she offered to purchase a number of, what do you call them again? Ventilators. And has contributed the sum of 1.4 million Barbados dollars to purchase ventilators for the people of this nation. The others who have also offered to purchase, and the truth is, we saw also with Courts Barbados today a donation of beds for the quarantine facility. Sagicor has generously donated the temperature scanners for the airports and for the airport and the seaport. There are going to be 2 at the airport and 1 at the seaport. So that when I say to you that I feel proud to be Prime Minister of this country, it is because people are standing up and being counted from all corners and all quarters in this nation. Mr. Speaker, in addition, therefore, to the $10 million to the Welfare Department and the $10 million to the household survival, to the most vulnerable, this household survival program of $20 million in the first instance will be topped up if it is not enough. Because, as I said to you, the most important thing is for people to keep their heads above water. As you can see, it is not a kill cow, and I wish I could do more. But the most important thing now is not to leave anybody behind. And all of us have to adjust in order to carry forward. And if we can get the contributions by ordinary Barbadians to the fund that has been set up, then I believe that we can go a long way towards being able to more than double the amount that the government will sustain on its own. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I give the assurance that we may have to come back and discuss in this honorable chamber the domestic food security program. And at this point, luckily, the Agricultural Development Fund has about $25 million in it, and therefore is more than capable of helping us to help Barbadians to be able to plant the food, what I have called to the Minister of Agriculture, the 6-week and the 12-week crops. Particularly, and I'm told that those are better for you because they're less starchy and there are more greens in there. But that those are the kinds of things that we need to be seeing. The Ministry of Agriculture has identified 750 acres of land. And once again, because this was being planned before COVID-19, we have been able to ramp up urgently to be able to meet now the needs of COVID-19. And I look forward to going with the Minister of Agriculture next week and starting to see exactly where the expansion is going to come, both from the BAMC lands as well as the private farmers in Barbados, who all have said that they're prepared also to stand up and be counted. Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to speak about tourism marketing at this stage because it's too early to even do that. And suffice it to say that we will come back there. But it brings me to the point that this country will also have not just a household survival program, but a jobs, investment, and business survival program. The private sector is the largest investor and employer in Barbados without contradiction, by a factor of almost 4 times what the government currently employees. And therefore, there is no doubt in my mind that this is going to be severely disruptive, because when people don't have money in their pockets, they cannot spend, and indirectly the rest of the economy is affected. As a result, Mr. Speaker, the government will, one, facilitate businesses to use this pause in activity to upskill and invest so that they can come back stronger. And that's the philosophy that is underpinning our actions. We will also, as I will shortly announce, be in a position to see some of them, through deferrals and access to working capital, be able to do things that they might not otherwise be able to do were we not dealing with a cooperative banking sector, as I will shortly point out. And three, that we will also be able to facilitate and to fast-track a number of investments where the private sector has the capital and is ready to move in short order. What does this mean specifically? One, in the tourism and direct services sector, some companies will lose all their revenues but still have fixed costs, as I said. The severance payments fund of the government of the National Insurance Scheme in Barbados has $141 million, and the Unemployment Benefit Fund has $19 million. My officials and I have already discussed that if push comes to shove, at the appropriate time, we will recapitalize the Unemployment Benefit Fund if it continues to be under pressure. And the chairman of the National Insurance Scheme, to his credit, the member for St. Michael West Central, had an emergency meeting with his board, I believe, yesterday. In addition to that, we have also recognized that those, therefore, who are laid off immediately now will have the opportunity to be able to get their unemployment benefits, which will guarantee them 60% of their earnings, insurable earnings, up to a limit of 26 weeks. And indeed, one of the things that the National Insurance Board agreed to yesterday, that it has relaxed the requirement to visit the employment exchange at Warrens so that there can be a one-stop shop rather than the bureaucracy that now attends itself to the claiming of unemployment benefits. Excuse me. Secondly, that those on short week, because we recognize that some people may keep people on their payroll because they've developed bonds with their employees, and they may have the capacity as a company to still hold on to people even in the short term for 3 months, 6 months, and they may put them on a 3-day week, a 4-day week, a 2-day week. But the days that they are not paying for them, the National Insurance Board will give them 60% of their earnings for those days. So to give an example, Mr. Speaker, if you are put on a 3-day week, then the National Insurance Board will pay 60% of the wages you would have earned for the other 2 days of that short week. And in addition, we are we are recommending that those entities, hotels particularly, and tourism-related establishments use the opportunity to participate in the National Training Initiative, which will refocus its efforts to do as much training for the workers in the tourism and tourism-related sectors as far as possible during this downturn in activity for them. For those employers, however, sir, who are prepared to retain 3/4 of their workforce, even if some on short week, we are going to defer the obligation for them to pay the employer's contributions for 3 months in the first instance, with the preparation to extend it for another 3 months immediately if the crisis goes beyond the first 3 months. So that those employers who keep 3/4 of their workforce on full or short week, we will remove from you the obligation of immediate payment of that employer's contribution for the NIS, thereby reducing your statutory amount. Remember what I said, Mr. Speaker? The businesses in this sector, they spend money on wages, NIS, debt service, utilities, supplies, marketing and promotion. But by far the biggest hits are youth and accommodation, depending on whether that's part of their debt service or not. It will not be if they're renting. By far, the largest amounts are for wages, debt service, and rent, NIS. And therefore, what we've also tried to do, Mr. Speaker, is to literally reach out to the banks of Barbados and to ask the banks of this country to work with us in a program to be able to sustain enterprises in Barbados and households. Let me be very clear. Jobs, investment, and businesses have to survive. If not when the pandemic goes, if not when we start to recover, if we have to start from scratch, it is going to take that much longer from a dead start than it takes from an enterprise that already knows its structure, its business, its market, its employees, everything. And that's why I say that the most important thing for us to do is to keep people's heads above water. And whatever it takes, and that's why this is not now a stabilization program, but a survival program because of what we are facing. And what have the banks, therefore, after 2 weeks of discussions with the Barbados Bankers Association, some of the announcements have already been made. I make them and repeat them for the sake of completeness. One, that there will be a 6-month payment moratorium on all existing loans and mortgages for persons and businesses who are directly affected and directly impacted by COVID-19. And you must go to your banks and work out those programs, because that 6-month payment moratorium makes all the difference in being able to have the space to do some of the things, because you are no longer forced to make that debt payment as your first payment when the month comes. Similarly, we recognize that people are concerned about their houses, and therefore the 6-month moratorium for the mortgages for those people who will lose their jobs or those people whose businesses are affected is absolutely critical, because people now struggling to take care of themselves, struggling now to see how they can buy food, struggling to do everything else. You can't be worrying at this time, with this devastation being as large as it is, about if you can lose your house too. It can't make no sense. I'm also calling on all landlords to desist from putting out anybody at this stage and remind us that at this stage, this is an entreaty and a request. But I speak to you in the Parliament of Barbados that knows how to convert entreaties and requests into laws. Thirdly, the commercial banks have also agreed to temporary working capital financing options for corporates and small businesses. Now, who are directly impacted by COVID-19 as well. And we all know that cash is king at this time. And therefore, the ability to have access to working capital is extremely important. If you don't have oxygen in your body when you are trying to keep your head above water, you will drown. And when you drown, you will die. Simple. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, my government will also recapitalize the Small Hotel Investment Fund with $20 million in order to allow small hotels to borrow and to blend with other commercial funds so that they can refurbish their properties during this down period, such that when they come back, they are bigger and better looking and more attractive as they go into the marketplace. I recognize that the $20 million is not a large sum, but it is used to help blend with other funds that are available from the commercial banking sector. And as a result, because we want to blend it, we have taken the decision to ensure that the interest rate payable for loans from the Small Hotel Investment Fund will no longer be at 5%, but will be reduced to 3.5% to make cheaper the cost of capital. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other people who are likely to be directly impacted are those who I know well, having spent a large part of my time as a teenager dabbling in those areas. I refer to the artistic industry, to the musicians, the dancers, the artists, all of whom are going to be significantly impacted by the absence of tourists on this island because of the work, and indeed because of the constraints on gatherings in public places for recreational purposes being reduced to 100, it is, then they are unlikely to be able to start making their money as they would normally do in April and May and June in the run-up to crop over. I've said that it is too early to pass judgment on crop over. We will await, but that is not a discussion for tonight. In the interim, however, my government will take $1 million from the Arts and Sports Development Fund in order to fund a program dedicated to be able to have the artists, the dancers, and the musicians be able to support us over the course of the next 6 months with content necessary for Barbadians as they remain largely inside, with content that is developmental, with content that is designed to help shape values. On my Facebook page on Sunday morning at 5:30, I woke up and I was listening to a third world song that I had not heard before, just released. And it was called You Are Not Lonely. You Don't Walk Alone. I would like everybody to go and listen to it. I listened to it about 10 times, over and over and over. And in a very funny way, it became my devotional session on that Sunday morning last. And I know that in my most difficult of days, what music did for me to cause me to believe that I could survive anything. I know what it was to listen to Tanya Stevens' album Revolution, or to listen to the Calypsos by Stalin, or to listen to music by Roberta Flack, The Impossible Dream. I could go on and on. I know what music does to the human spirit. I know what writing and reading does to the human spirit. I know what movement does to the human spirit. And I know that we cannot leave them behind as we go forward, because Barbados' population base, even normally, is too small to be able to sustain the creative economy, and hence it is only through tourism and the use of technology to the global market that we are able to sustain livelihoods. And I know it because I've worked in it, and I've seen people move from having to keep 2 and 3 jobs because they like the arts to being able to work full-time, depending on the creative economy as their sole source of income. In addition, I want to single out also the beach vendors who, whether they are doing hair braiding or renting chairs or selling arts and craft, they too, who sustain their families, will be affected by this crisis. And for those of them, now is not the time to talk about who should have been registered at the NIS or not. There will be another time for that. But for those who are not registered as self-employed at the National Insurance Fund, they will be able to register with the NCC so long as they have a license from the NCC, have been working in this area. They will be able to register with them, and for that information to go to the Household Mitigation Unit, such that they can benefit from the $600 a month allocation for the vulnerable households. I am told that there are just over 200 licensed beach vendors in this country, and they therefore will benefit from that. Mr. Speaker, we are also recognizing that the National Training Initiative must come into its own at this stage, as I indicated, and that whether it is the tourism sector or tourism-related sector or car washers or public servants or whoever, just as the Minister of Education is having to put together a program that will allow for more flexibility in how our people learn. We believe that the National Training Initiative can use the same digital framework, and therefore some of the Secretariat for the regathering that now the Attorney General has renamed WeCaring will now morph completely into the COVID-19 unit in order to be able to have a dedicated outreach to our young people, to be able to put those values like caring. I see that out of Canada we've learned the new concept of caremongering, bringing together in one place what persons like the Honorable Leader of the Opposition and others on a Sunday who preach from the pulpit want to be able to sustain through the use of the New Testament in changing people's attitudes to themselves, to their family, to their God. And therefore we look forward to being able to have that program in place. The National Training Initiative, I've said to the country already, this is a 7-year training program for us to up our game and to become world class. We can't do it overnight. We have to do it systematically, Mr. Speaker. And I believe in my gut that the money we spend in education and training is going to be some of the most important money we spend in this country, because that is what is going to make the earning difference, the difference to being able to take risks, the difference in being able to treat people properly, the difference in not wanting to hurt people, the difference in not wanting to rob or kill. Because we then understand that education, as I said 2 days ago in the session with the teachers, is not just about geography or history or English or maths, but it is about the development of the person, and that the social and emotional learning targets are as important as the academic learning targets, and hence national training is not only focused on the substance of the task, but the attitude that we bring to the job and our engagement with other people with whom we interact while we are working in our job. Mr. Speaker, in addition to that, those measures thus far, the Central Bank of Barbados has been engaging with the commercial banks for some time about the public's concern about the level of bank fees, particularly given the low interest rate environment which the public faces. My government understands that with the changes in the technology, banks wanted to discourage individuals from using traditional channels, such as going into the bank and queuing in long lines to go to a bank teller. Indeed, the government is supportive of this trend because it makes the conduct of one's banking businesses much simpler, rather than losing the time and traffic to get to the bank or catching a bus to town to get to the bank, then to go into the bank to stand up for a long time and 2-3 hours gone before you know it. However, we do believe that the cost of banking services should not discourage ordinary citizens from participating in the financial system. And it has had that unintended consequence, as well as the deeper issue which we will have to confront, even if not now in a COVID-19 environment. That is the high volume of persons who are being unbanked in this country. I am particularly concerned about what appears to be an inordinate high level of monthly service charges. And as a result, in addition, while I'm aware that some banks currently do not charge a monthly service for fees to senior citizens, it is not the practice of all. I have been advised by the Governor of the Central Bank today that, however, on April 1st, 2020, and this is not an April Fool's joke, that no bank will impose any charges on senior citizens in this country as a monthly charge. The Central Bank, Mr. Speaker, of Barbados currently has no explicit authority to set fees, but it has been engaged in a review of the other fees. The bank will continue to remain in discussion with the banks on the other fees. But as I said, our immediate concern was to be able to facilitate the 6-month moratorium on loans and mortgages as well as the provision of temporary working capital in order to be able to help people keep their heads above water. But we will remain engaged on the numbers of increasing persons who are unbanked and the extent to which the fees remain a concern. And finally, to be able to create a mechanism, and maybe, you must never misuse a crisis. And this may well be the time, and I throw it out there for whoever, this may well be the time for us to create a digital market that will better match good ideas to people who have capital. Because there are a lot of people in this country who may still have capital, but capital can't protect you in the long run from people suffering. Can't. And to the extent that there are people, because I make the point all the time that there is nothing like a crisis to bring out the ingenuity in people. I remember when the prison burnt, when I went in the same Harrison's Point, and they showed me, I remember the leader of the opposition might remember, because we were working together in them days. I don't mean in the same party, I mean in the same ministry. You remember? And they took tissue. And the men took the tissue, and by putting it in the electric socket long enough, over and over and over and over, they were able eventually to get fired. Remember, St. Thomas remembers, to get fired in order to be able to light cigarettes. It just shows you the things that people do when they have nothing but time to reflect and engage and to be able to create. So I have every confidence that we must move beyond the stage of talking about the need of fueling trust between each other and of ensuring that we can have an environment that those who have good ideas but no capital can be supported in a framework to those who have capital but no good ideas. In addition, Mr. Speaker, my government will also look forward to being able to encourage the Barbados National Oil Company Limited and the Barbados Light and Power to engage in a hedging exercise to lock in the currently low oil prices for a period of up to 2 years. The Minister with responsibility for commerce, who has been on the front line in the last few weeks in trying to secure this country's food supply of sanitary and hygiene items, and who also has been charged with the responsibility of making sure that there will be no price gouging in this country, profiting on the backs of people suffering, this minister will now have to issue general policy directions, as he is entitled to do under the law, to the Fair Trading Commission to indicate this government's support for the policy of hedging in energy products and to allow these transactions to proceed quickly before we lose the benefit of any low prices that we can lock in through the purchase of hedging. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I spoke earlier of a public sector counter-cyclical policy and what is the essence of the expenditure that we ourselves will now also put beyond the household survival program. One, the government will expand its capital works program beyond what is in these estimates. These estimates already have a capital works program of some size, just about $200 million, but we will now add the following projects to be started as soon as we can manage the movement of people fully within the context of this pandemic. And interestingly enough, I received up to last night an article that reminds us that vitamin D, which is available in sunshine, is one of the critical things that people need to have to help, in addition to boosting the immune system in being able to fight the pandemic, which is why there's commentary about how it is doing in the hotter climates as opposed to the colder climates and more temperate climates. Mr. Speaker, we will carry out and use this opportunity to carry out an urgently expanded needed repairs to our schools. I feel for the Minister of Education sometimes and for the parents and for the children in the schools, when we are being told that because of this environmental problem or this environmental problem, schools have to shut down. My government, in addition to the funds granted in this estimates for school repairs, will add another $20 million to build capacity for disaster preparedness, to improve the quality of the school environment, and to ensure that we will move. There is already, I believe, a sum of $12 million in the estimates, and therefore this is a significant sum of money. And the problem normally is, how can you spend that volume of money within the short 6 to 8 weeks of the summer vacation? This may now be our opportunity to be able to spend larger sums of this money to be able to rehabilitate in a serious way the Barbados secondary and primary school plant, and this, therefore, the equivalent sum of $32 million between now and the end of the year will be used to supplement that. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Housing has reported to me that there have been a number of buildings that are derelict. He has a government rental bill of $70 million a year, and between himself and the Minister of Public Works have both indicated that they want to be able to do some rehabilitative work on some of these buildings. The old Ministry of Commerce building on Reef Road, the BICO building in town at the corner of Pinfold Street, and Clico building, and we can go on and on. The Minister of Public Works, the old Water Authority building that was abandoned when a new edifice was built on the hill for large sums of money. We will allocate the sum of $20 million, and I believe the Attorney General has begged for the community center as well in Bashmore that has remained derelict for years and therefore has not been able properly. It was demolished. It was derelict for years. It has been demolished, but we now need a facility that will allow vendors on the east coast of Barbados to be able to play their products. The member for St. Michael North, as Minister of Industry, has promised me a national industrial policy soon. But you would know that he and I have spoken and peaked, and I've spoken also with his consultant who is preparing it. And therefore, I will allocate the sum of $10 million to the Barbados Industrial Development, BIDC, in order for them, first and foremost, to build a center for innovation in Bridgetown, and secondly, to start the process of the building of facilities to house auto mechanics in bays such that we can have clustered properties. And I am sanguine enough to know that that first $10 million that I'm allocating to the BIDC is not sufficient, but we are also going to relook the rules surrounding the Industrial Credit Fund and all of the other funds that exist to be able to see how best we can use the resources within those funds in order to boost industrial activity in this country. And industrial activity is not just traditional manufacturing, but we have among us mechanics and auto car men who have been able for years to sustain themselves, but who regrettably constitute in many, too many instances, a nuisance for people in residential areas, and therefore we need to transition them to new environments. This process will take a number of years, but it has to start somewhere. So that $10 million will first address the National Innovation Center for our young people who we want to add value and to use the crisis in a creative way, as I expressed just now, but the rest will now also be to start the transitioning of our auto mechanics from residential areas into clustered areas. And that way, Mr. Speaker, they can then plan who buys what equipment so that they can then get a better return on their investment into equipment, because in clusters, they are in a position for one person to specialize with X, another person in Y, another person in Z, and they then can be able to work out how they work with each other. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, we are also going to finally, and we have to do this as a matter of urgency, and they know that as soon as the Harrison's Point facility is finished, in fact, it may start even quite before the end of the Harrison's Point facility, we need to finish the school meals complex that the last government started but left unresolved for a number of years. Regrettably, it has been the subject of a dispute between the contractor and the employer, but it will cost us just under $6 million, and we will lose the benefit of the equipment and the other things if we do not invest the money to complete that center at this point in time. Am I disappointed that the overruns have been so significant before we have to put this $6 million? Of course I am. Am I also concerned about the Auditor General's report on this center? Of course I am. But I also know that a time may come when we may have to do some significant feeding of people in the course of the next few months, and we need to have the best facilities in order to operate and do that properly so that Barbadians can keep their heads above the water. Mr. Speaker, I will just recall that we have projects that are continuing or about to start. I spoke earlier to the country about the Fairchild Street Rehabilitation Project, and it is more timely than ever now, and I announced too that when we finish Fairchild Street, we will go seamlessly into the river bus stand, because it must be important to us that vendors operate in the best possible conditions that they can operate in this country, and this government is not going to look away from them. And hence that $4.6 million that we are spending on the Fairchild Street Market to build more than 115 vending chattel houses and a butcher's block that is being relocated from the back of where Golden Square was to that new site. That $4.6 million, we have already laid the concrete base, the services are in, and we have a number of small contractors now who will be doing the huts in order to be able to allow those vendors who are all out there to be able to move back in, hopefully within the next few months, in a clean, pretty, and hospitable environment. But that will make no sense if we don't now spend and do phase 2, which is from the Fairchild Street back to the Constitution River Bus Terminal in what is known otherwise as the Old River Bus Stand and all the shanties that are there. We have also, Mr. Speaker, started at the UDC with the provisioning of electricity and water at Temple Yard, which, as you know, was without electricity and water for a number of years. We have now also committed, and I did the site visit a little while ago, to ask them to use where burnt out, Mr. Speaker, where the butchers used to be, my good friend, my constituent who is no longer with us, and others, and to knock down there and to be able to create a proper entrance and to help them landscape Temple Yard, because I tell you there are a number of us and a number of visitors to the island who want to be able to have that kind of experience, because you don't always feel like eating fancy food. You don't always feel like lying in certain places. And I wish they would start back the Sunday night functions, because I must tell you that that was one of the best and most peaceful and creative of evenings, poetry and music that I engaged in the last few years in this country. And we will help them also through the Arts and Sports Promotion Fund to be able to ensure that they can have their weekly things once we can get back to a stage where gatherings can be allowed in this country. Mr. Speaker, sir, there was also 2 projects funded by the Caribbean Development Bank, which have been on the books for some time, and my government has taken them back up in the last 6 months, 9 months to be able to resuscitate them. Regrettably, the monies did come in, but the monies were diverted by the last government to do normal spending rather than to use them for the projects for which they were borrowed. Having had the opportunity to resolve these issues with the Caribbean Development Bank, we are now in a position to see the resumption of the Speightstown flood mitigation project that the Honourable Member for St. Peter will be very happy to hear. We know why he is not with us. We respect his Sabbath, but I'm sure that when he hears this tomorrow morning that this is a priority, he will be happy. And also the Constitution River flood mitigation project. In the first instance, the Speightstown one has voted $6.5 million, and in the Constitution River flood mitigation, $10.2 million, and both will be conducted and carried out by the Barbados Tourism Investment Inc. Similarly, we expect the completion of the Golden Square Freedom Park in this year of our Lord, and that we want to believe that Barbadians will come to understand that a place that is responsible for all of our modern rights, political, social, and economic rights, cannot be a place that 95% of Barbados does not even know where it is or what it is about. And a people who do not know their history, a people who do not understand the nature of the struggle, are likely to be condemned by repeating the mistakes of the past because no one has spent the time to let them know where the danger signs are. You know, in a very real sense, Mr. Speaker, we have said that war will not come to us in the traditional ways. We didn't know how true we were speaking because what we are facing has the potential to have all of the calamity and disruption of a war. It's just come to us in the form of a pandemic, combined and undergirded by a climate crisis. And therefore, more than ever, as I said yesterday, we have to act as one, and we cannot under any circumstances begin to believe that it is okay for people to start to fall off the sides of the country, the sides of the train, because we need everybody, as many hands to carry weight as possible. Mr. Speaker, in addition to that, over the course of the last 12 months, one of the conditions that my government has made before a number of foreign direct investors got duty-free concessions for employment and for foreign exchange earning activity is that they start their spending early. As a result, there are a number of projects in the pipeline, as the country already knows. Some of them may well be compromised, but a number of them will continue. I have been advised by my officers who have consulted with the investors, and a number of them, that one, the project at Sam Lords, the $400 million project at Sam Lords that resumed a few weeks ago, will continue unabated. Two, the 75 apartments at the Crane Hotel, which are continuing now, will continue unabated and should be completed this year. Three, the $20 million improvements to the Apes Hill Golf Course are still very much on the cards. We also expect that by the middle of the year, if not sooner, depending on how we manage the pandemic, with how and where it goes in the next few days or weeks, that the $60 million expansion of Sandals Dover will also go forward. The Indigo redevelopment of the old Caribbean Hotel has been put in a position to start whenever they want to. And that is a $150 million development. The Royalton redevelopment of the old Discovery Bay Hotel. As you know, Royalton is probably the largest tourism vertically integrated company in Canada, and therefore they are in a healthy position generally. We are told that this is likely to go forward. Sagicor has also given us the assurance that their retirement village project, having done massive earthworks in the course of the last year, that they will now be coming out of the ground as we go forward, and that they too have the funds for this. And we have been equally advised that the Hyatt Ziva project on Bay Street, which has been the subject of some controversy, will also go forward because they also have the funding for that. Mr. Speaker, that is still a significant slew of capital works projects. And when you combine the government's public sector capital works projects and the private sector, it is a lot of work. But we are not stopping there. There are a number of other areas that we need to be able to see significant progress, even as we are not seeing tourists in the immediate future. One, in this building where we meet, which is the subject of the ownership of Enlico. Every time I call that name, it feels funny. Enlico. They have proposed to us, and remember, the government of Barbados would have underwritten $600 million in liabilities for British American and CLECO, but would have received only the equivalent of $60 million or so in assets. We have an aggressive program, and it is my government's intention to have passed in this Parliament the Barbados Asset Management Agency that will take all of the assets of Enlico and ResLife, as well as other assets in central government from lands and other interests. Right now, the government of Barbados owns all of these things, but we have not been able to put a balance sheet to it in order to be able to move it forward and to leverage the balance sheet in the interest of the country. One of the early projects that they have discussed with me is right next door. And I am awaiting now the application to town planning by them for the development of commercial and a residential building right next door here, and similarly a 5-story car park to the back of this building, as well as a commitment to redevelop the wetlands of Graham Hall that are immediately behind there that were the subject of sewage running over the last few years rather than environmentally pleasing wetlands as we should have it controlled to be. In addition to the Barbados Asset Management Agency, Mr. Speaker, which will be following a model that protects the assets of this country by ensuring that its governance framework reflects the highest and most appropriate standards, reflecting the similar approach of the National Insurance Board, such that no one group of people will be in charge of how assets will be managed going forward. But, Mr. Speaker, that isn't all. We are in a unique position in this country. It is unbelievable. The last few weeks before COVID-19 became prevalent, my ministry was in the process of looking at the structure of the Housing Credit Fund, which has just over $40 million in it, to see how we could leverage that money to unlock another $200 million in the commercial banking sector to fund the housing program that we have been talking about for some time. The Minister of Housing has identified 1,580 housing lots from existing lands from St. Lucie to St. Philip to Christchurch. But we have also acquired commitments through planning gains for another 200 acres of lots that we will put into government's housing program that we will call Homes for All. And why is this still important in spite of the bleak economic future, sir? Barbados, for the first time in a long time, finds itself in a position that it is cheaper to own property in 2020 than to rent property. The interest rates now being charged for mortgages are now below 4%. In some instances, 3.5, 3.75%. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, when you look at the commitment that we have given both to the public servants and to persons generally earning under $4,000 a month in this country, there is no better time for us, even in the midst of crisis, to have the confidence in ourselves to launch an aggressive Homes for All program for Bajans in Barbados. Mr. Speaker, this program will boost the construction industry, but it will also allow families to start talking from as early as this weekend. A police constable and his wife, a teacher and her husband, a nurse, many of the nurses in particular, and I've heard you, many of you are single mothers and therefore find it difficult to be able to access mortgages even though you can pay the monthly amount. And what therefore will this government do? We have committed that we will only ask you to cover the cost of roads and services, such that land that goes anywhere between $20 to $25 a square foot, we will pass on to you at between $10 to $12 a square foot in this country. What does this mean? That for a 4,000 square foot lot, you will pay anything between $40,000 to $48,000, but that you will get the benefit of a similar $52,000 to $60,000 that you can then put down and use as part of your equity to determine your entitlement to the mortgage. So let's look and see what we're talking about. Because we believe even with this, there are public servants who can make the direct debit arrangements for mortgages from their salaries, and therefore make them prime candidates, Mr. Speaker, to be able to fuel this housing program of which we speak. Mr. Speaker, right now the UDC and the RDC will build a 2-bedroom wooden house on average for $68,000. If you add to that they can build a 3-bedroom wooden house for about $88,000, and you add the $40,000 in land to that, then they're looking to get a mortgage of anywhere between $125,000 to $130,000. But the bottom line, Mr. Speaker, is this, that the value of the property is not the 125 or the 135. The value of the property now is closer to 185 or 175, depending on the size, location, etc. So that all of a sudden, a public servant who would have been told no to 100% mortgage can now go and borrow money at 3.5 or 3.75% in this country, in spite of what we're going through in the economic crisis, to fuel a housing boom and to be able to fuel the security necessary to cement their family's future, such that they will not be at the mercy of good or bad landlords in this country. Mr. Speaker, I am told that you can build a 3-bedroom wall house without land for $185,000. And if you add the land to that, you get $225,000. And Mr. Speaker, go and work out the mortgage payments and you begin to understand that we now have the opportunity for one of the most affordable home ownership programs that I would like to believe in time, because of the government's commitment to transfer the land as seed funding to people who are in the lower middle income brackets, will come to regard this as equivalent to the platform given to others with the Tenantry's Freehold Purchase Program, which equally made the cost of land affordable under the great late Tom Adams in this country.
Second generation of empowerment.
Without a doubt. Mr. Speaker, a 2-bedroom wall house will probably come in at about 155 to 160. Once again, making that possible for somebody to start as a starter house. And in 5 years, 7 years' time, the police constable might be a police sergeant, and then he decides that he can afford to add on a 3rd bedroom or a larger living room or a larger veranda. Our people, Mr. Speaker, only want a start. But I go further. This program, even though we have an aggressive program to start as a government of our own, and we are now and have worked through a lot of the issues, and this has nothing to do with what we will also do to help squatters, which we continue, as we announced, we will continue to act in the way in which people without title. In the same way, because they too must see a way towards ownership, but they must see it through a program that also allows them to pay their way this time and not simply take opportunities, even though it was hard for them to access legitimate benefits, we understand. Mr. Speaker, this is critical, because I know as a lawyer who practiced criminal law, that once a man or a woman has something to defend, they're less likely to play fast and loose with it. Once a man or a woman has a house or children or something to live for that is meaningful. And that's why in these estimates, the National First Job Initiative, with the sum of $1.5 million under the Minister of Labor and Social Partnership, remains in these estimates today, because there are things, even as hard as these estimates are, we must do to be able to advance our people to be ahead of the curve. That's why the Minister of Education is being given $2.5 million for a robotics program, because it is not going to be good enough for Barbadian children just to be catching up with the rest of the world. We know that even from here, even in a pandemic, even from home, that they can reach out to a global society with programming. There is a young boy from the Minister of Education's constituency, 22 years old, a graduate of St. Michael's School, doing the absolute most amazing work in terms of software development and artificial intelligence in this country. These are the people. I don't know where the next Gary Sobers coming from, or the next Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, but I do know that if we create the environment within which we can allow our people to flourish, allow our people to be secure, then I believe, Mr. Speaker, that we can see our way even when we have been sent back to the starting line, as we have been with this pandemic. And Mr. Speaker, renewable energy. I'm sorry. My hands are big enough to hug him still.
Social distancing.
One Barbados. Others are telling me social distancing, but that does not stop me from. And I receive it back. The bottom line, Mr. Speaker, and that's why this country is so great. We may have our differences, but we know how to come together when the greatest threats hold us and besiege us. Mr. Speaker, renewable energy, the Minister for Water and Energy and Utilities has the mandate to help us get the renewable energy program off the ground. Mr. Speaker, I am one of the first to admit that the process has been too bureaucratic and too lengthy. Indeed, last December, I met with the Barbados Light and Power, I met with the others in Cabinet, and I indicated in fact, it was in October that we indicated that we would move the feed-in tariff from 1 megawatt to 5 megawatts. But I'm also saying that in December when we met, we told the Barbados Light and Power that you and the people who are applying to do large renewable projects over 5 megawatts need to meet and come to a commercial agreement as to the tariff below the feed-in tariff price for 1 to 5 megawatts, or up to 5 megawatts. And that only if you cannot reach that agreement, then the other regulatory agencies will have to step in. This means that we may have to do general policy directives once again to the FTC. But one of the problems that we have, sir, is that in this crisis, if you lag, you lose. If you snooze, you lose. And therefore, I am going to have before all Barbados to give some commitments here tonight. There will have to be expedited procurement, but we will make a list of all persons who will benefit from the capital works projects that we announced here, and those who benefit from the contracts. A document will be laid in the House of Assembly on the floor of the House to be able to indicate the beneficiaries of those contracts from here on in that may be the subject of expedited procurement. If we don't do this, next year this time we will still be looking to start these projects and people will be suffering and cannot eat in this country. And I don't know about anybody in this chamber, but I have not come to public life to preside over that. Barbadians must work as soon as we can do so safely and appropriately in the context of this pandemic. Similarly, Mr. Speaker, the renewable energy program, therefore, there are a number of applications in town country planning for major renewable energy projects, and there is also a 300 million green energy part that is part of a negotiated outfall of the agreement between SBRC and the Sanitation Services Authority. Up until when we came to government, we were paying a huge sum to the SBRC with respect to the facility in Vaucluse St. Thomas. They have graciously agreed to a reduction of $11 million a year, from the sums that the SSA would have paid them. But part and parcel of the negotiations would also see us, therefore, agreeing to partner with them into this green energy park. And one of the results will see us not paying that $13 million a year as well, and holding 15% of the green energy park to allow us to be able to earn money for the Sanitation Services Authority, in addition to removing from its books fully the $24 million that it paid each and every year under the last government from the time the agreement was signed in 2009 until 2019 last year. Mr. Speaker, the medicinal cannabis also, the regulations, I'm told, will shortly be completed, and therefore I expect that we will be in a position to be able to see some movement on that at a very time when tourism is not going to be standing on its hind legs, earning and leading for us as it has done for the majority of our history. Mr. Speaker, these are difficult times, and it requires unusual action. This pandemic affects water, and we have inherited a situation, as I told you, that is hard, that has seen up to 50% non-revenue water. In other words, for every gallon of water you pump out of the reservoir, you're losing half of it before it gets to the houses. And this hasn't happened by any one government. This has happened through the process of time because the pipes are old. The pipes, in some instances, are rusty. My government will support the Barbados Water Authority in a program to be able to undertake a $50 million capital works program, including lane mains on Highway 1, Highway 7, as we seek to redo those roads, because it makes no sense having the Ministry of Public Works undertake these roads and leaving the old pipes in the ground and then having to dig up the roads again to fix the pipes. So we are trying to coordinate the laying of the mains with the roadworks program, and we are also in conversation with a friendly bilateral government to be able to do roads on the East Coast, which I have come to describe as the closest thing to Disneyland in Barbados, especially when you're going through Foster Hall and Andromeda, when the roads are going literally like a roller coaster. Mr. Speaker, that includes all of the other roads in St. John. We have given a commitment to the member for St. John that we will do right by him with respect to a lot of the roads, because in spite of being represented at the highest level in this country, St. John has some of the worst roads in Barbados. Mr. Speaker, the water that I spoke about is not just about supporting the Water Authority in a $50 million project, but it is also, having discussed it with the chair of the Water Authority and the minister, there are over 3,000 people whose water have been disconnected in Barbados for all kinds of reasons. It is the view of my government that now is not the time to talk about money when people are at risk of being victims of a pandemic. And therefore, immediately, I am asking the Barbados Water Authority to turn back on the water for all of those customers for the next 3 to 6 months. But I'm equally asking those customers, fair is fair. Fair is fair. And even if it is a little piece and a little piece, don't let down the side. Pay some. And let us go forward, because we accept that in some instances people can't pay the full amount. But if you got a $20, go and put it down there for me at the Water Authority, and let us go forward. Even if we're not asking you to clear your arrears, at least stay current in the months going ahead. Mr. Speaker, this is one nation. As I said, these are grave times, and we face a major challenge. I don't know if this is going to be enough. I swear to you. But I do know that whatever it takes to keep Barbadians' heads above the water, this government shall do it. And whether it is talking to people locally, whether it is encouraging investment locally, regionally, or internationally, whether it is dealing and trying to create new space with the international financial institutions, whether it is talking straight to our people and getting them to understand now is your chance, as we have to cool it down, stay off the road a little bit. Now is the chance to build back up your skills, to do some reading, to do some learning, to do some reflection, to do the things that make you stronger. You only grow from a baby to a child to an adult if you start to eat and take care of yourself and put things in your body to grow. You only get seeds moving from seeds to corn if you nurture it and give it water and give it manure and give it fertilizer and the other things. And equally, I believe that this time in the world is a time for us to reflect on our common humanity, a time for us to reflect on how we relate to each other, a time for us to understand that what matters most is life, that we cannot give back anybody life, a time to understand that equally we have obligations. Earlier today, you would have heard that Barbados recorded another 2 cases, which brings it to 6. And I say 6 because many of you who follow the Johns Hopkins site, Mr. Speaker, and I show it to you, make it a document of the House for what it is worth, cruise ship passengers are recorded under cruise ships as if they are a sovereign nation. So cruise ships have 712, you understand? I have tried to explain, and one of the things about the next few months is that you're going to hear good, you're going to hear bad. You're going to hear ugly, you're going to hear beautiful. You're going to hear all things. But whatever it is, you're going to hear it straight and direct from me. Because I believe that I have been in public life too long to be doing contortions and distortions and all kind of torsions in order to be able to speak to the people of this country. This country is the reason why I am who I am. I don't mean by being Prime Minister. I mean by the passion that I have for the Caribbean civilization, by the passion that I have for anything that is Bajan, and by being able to celebrate the creativity, the resilience, and the compassion and social justice. You heard me talk about Rihanna early. You know what is the most amazing thing about Rihanna? That in her work, whether it is in the production of the lingerie, all sizes, whether it is in the production of the makeup, all shades. And you know why? Because deep down in Westbury Road, and even at the place that these people will call up and on,
Honorable Prime Minister, not these people.
Mr. Speaker, you too.
Not these people, Honorable Prime Minister.
But Mr. Speaker, sometimes I feel you now speak more as the Member of Parliament than the person who went there. But she learned and had ingrained in her a sense of social justice, a sense of kadir and fairness. That's who we are. That's who we are. We don't see suffering and walk past. We don't see hardship and move along. We don't see people catching it and then say, that ain't nothing to do with me, so. And those who start to do it now, stop watching so much social media and television and American news cycle, because that is not who Barbadians are. I learned when my father was a Member of Parliament in the city of Bridgetown about share pot. It's not every day that everybody had something, but everybody would eat. Because who had would share. That is who we are. And I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, therefore, that is the same thing that also causes us to hold to our word. You know when Bajans tell you something and the rest of the Caribbean tell you, boy, you know, Baj, straight down the line. Straight down the line. So that's why when we say friends of all and satellites of none, people understand. It didn't matter if it's DLP, BLP, GLP, FLP. Joe, what yours is? PDP? I don't mean that disparagingly, sorry. It doesn't matter which one it is, because I know he feels the same way. Friends of all, satellites of none. And I know, Mr. Speaker, therefore, that we understand that with benefit comes burden. You ever see how the little old ladies going to pay the credit union the money when they borrow from it? Or going to give somebody the meeting turn, that it is their turn in a little envelope, and sometimes they got it stuffed down. You understand? And they're catching the bus at their own expense. Or even if the arthritis got them, they're going to pay because that is who we are. And I put this in the context of those who have concerns about the cruise ships. You can't accept the burden. So you can't accept the benefit of being a home port. For almost 15 years, you selling goods to the people every week. And whether it is whoever of the big merchants in town employing people, and they're delivering the goods, delivering the water, delivering whatever to the people. And the one time that they come and ask for provisioning, because fuel don't come out of the ocean, and they ain't got no photovoltaics powering ships. Similarly, they need food for the crew. They need food for the people. Even if they want to sail back to the UK, that is 9 days sailing. Now, who are we all of a sudden to say that don't come? I get it. And I'm not going to in any way put these country or Bajans at risk. And that is why I said to the chairman of the port, no shore leave when I realized that people were coming off. And similarly, no leave for passengers. Because we are already asking Barbadians not to gather beyond groups of 100 for recreational activity. So there can't be two sets of rules. But in any event, we knew that they were all going to be gone by Monday or Tuesday next week. I'm now told that they will all be gone by Sunday at the very latest in this country. And that in almost every instance, today, the one person who was tested positive yesterday, who was in isolation, I'm told by the cruise ship that there were 3 others who were in isolation, and the Minister of Health has indicated those were the ones who tested positive. So, and I say this because, others would have said to me, just report Barbados and don't say nothing about the cruise ships, but that's not who we are. I tell you as it is. So there are 4 on cruise ships. None of the 4 have gotten off the ship to come into Barbados. And then Barbados itself has 6 visitors. 2 who are non-nationals, and the other 4 who are nationals, all of whom came back from the United States of America. Yesterday, we indicated that we will be imposing either a self-quarantine or a quarantine for all persons returning from the USA, the UK, or Europe for 14 days. It's not because we don't like them. In fact, a lot of them are students, Bajan students, studying overseas. But when you come back home, if you're Bajan, relax yourself at home. The Ministry of Health has been doing the self-quarantining for about 6 weeks now, Minister. Yes. 6 weeks, sorry, Mr. Speaker. 6 weeks now. And the bottom line is that the public health officials have also been monitoring those self-quarantine people on a daily basis. I know where we are. And believe you me, Mr. Speaker, we are not perfect, but we are a lot better than most at this stage. I say genuinely, our concern is, and the only thing we don't have control over, is the supply and logistics, because bigger countries are pulling rank, and bigger countries are saying, downtown, a brush, don't mind you pay, don't mind you got money in there. We jump in rank and we pull in. It's going to make it a little difficult, but I know we can get by through this too. And all I'm asking, therefore, let us have discipline. Do not break rank, because if we break rank, Mr. Speaker, it becomes that much more difficult to keep Barbados safe. Sanitizer, soap and water, whatever it is, use it. Me, because I wear glasses, the hardest thing was about touching your face. And that's why they tell you not to wear the mask. If people want it, the government will give it to them. But the public health officials have told us in every instance, when you have a mask on, you are twitching and fixing it all the time. And you have a false sense of security, and therefore you are bringing the very same germs to your face where they should not be, and that your hands need to be so or so. Then they tell you, cough in your elbow, but if you're sneezing or have a runny nose like me, or you want to sneeze, use a tissue. Because if you sneeze in your elbow, the particles still going all about. Study it. But if you sneeze in tissue, you take it, you close it, put it in the garbage, and go and do what? Wash hands all over again. And these are things, they are so simple that it is amazing that this is what has brought the whole world to its knees. Social distancing, the AG said it well. Social distancing don't mean that I don't like you, can't meet with you, can't work with you. I just blow kisses at the leader of the opposition and he blow back at me. And the point is, affection comes first in the eyes, then in the mouth, in terms of the words that we let out. So I don't necessarily, as much as I want to hug you, I could bounce you. We can do the foot bounce too. In fact, I love the foot bounce and might keep it for the rest of my life instead of a handshake. So, Mr. Speaker, as we end this debate, let us all pull together as Barbadians. This government and the people, social partnership, opposition parties, church, civil society, all of us, I believe, are now acting with a sense of consideration and urgency. We have a plan, and we've had it for a while. The fiscal stimulus package of capital works, accommodation of lower tax revenues, the household investment program, the jobs, business and investment program. As I said, I hope that this is the whole package, but if the crisis proves to be enduring, treat this, Mr. Speaker, as phase one. Mr. Speaker, I hope that these initiatives will go a long way to blunting the consequences on ordinary Barbadians. And I ask us to rise to the occasion to carry along each other. We will look back at this moment in the future. We will look back at this time when the sun starts to shine again. Let us not see a nation that is cowed with fear and panic, Mr. Speaker. Let us not see a nation that is worried about where they will get their goods and supplies, and a nation that may be subdued by unfounded rumor. Let us, Mr. Speaker, let us each to a man and a woman, a boy and a girl, rise to the challenges of our times and rise together as one Barbados. Let us use the talents of all of our citizens, our friends, our partners, our neighbors, to face it. And let us demonstrate that we have not lost the resilience of our forefathers, the compassion of our forefathers, to recognize that it is our duty to carry the most vulnerable among us with us. Let us, Mr. Speaker, as we close this appropriation bill in the second reading for 2020 to 2021, remember that we must leave no one behind. Mr. Speaker, this has been an unusual time, for we look forward with anticipation to the year 2020. We look forward to it as the year when we would refine our finest vision of ourselves and set the task ahead of the third generation of independence. But we have been reminded that it is not only ours to plan and ours to achieve. We have, Mr. Speaker, words that we learned from primary school. And as we come together as a nation on Sunday to pray, and I hope that the nation will be given what time that prayer will be, across every home, across every household, let us remember the words of our national anthem, the verse that we don't sing often, but the verse that roots us all. The Lord has been our people's guide for past 300 years. With him still on our people's side, we have no doubts nor fears. Mr. Speaker, let this be our finest hour as a nation. I'm obliged. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now read a second time.
The question is that this bill be read a second time.
Sure.
All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central do now serve as Chairman of Committees.
The question is that the honorable member for St. Michael West Central be appointed Chairman of the Standing Finance Committee. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The honorable member is so appointed.
We have to move now that we go into Standing Finance Committee. Yeah, beg him, go into Standing Finance. No, that was appointing.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, and I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and that the House resolve itself into Standing Finance Committee.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into Standing Finance Committee. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Right, we're going to recommit. Yeah. Before you speak, leave. Yeah. I can put recommitted.
Sunday, front page. This House is in committee.
Mr. Chairman, the recommittal of the appropriation bill, especially the schedule. Head 13, Prime Minister's Office, recommitted and amended in the amount of $98,130,450.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that Head
Chairman.
13... Sorry. Mr. Chairman, sorry. I beg to move that Head 13 do now stand part as amended. As amended.
The question is that head 13 as amended stand part. All honour members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Head 34, recommitted and amended. Ministry of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment in the amount of $181,573,800.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Head 34 as amended do now stand part.
The question is that head 34 as amended do stand part. All honour members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Head 87, recommitted and amended. Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training in the amount of $320,425,740.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Head 87 do now stand part as amended.
The question is that head 87, as amended, stand par. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. Certainly.
Mr. Chairman, Clause 1 as amended.
Yeah.
Head it, sir.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
And what about?
Hey, it's almost passed.
Wait. No,
You wanna
Clause 2 as amended.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 2 do now stand part,
As amended.
as amended.
Big second that.
The question is that Clause 2 as amended stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Schedule as amended.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the schedule as amended do now stand part
The schedule to bill.
and be the schedule to the bill.
Seconder.
Seconder, please.
The question is that the schedule as amended be the schedule to the bill. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Report passing with amendments.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of the bill with amendments.
Seconder. A seconder, please.
Do it.
Oh, thank you.
We'll be done in supplementary. We go and come back in. Because we got to give notice of the
Yeah. Ready? Yeah. The question is that I do now report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee with amendments. All honor members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
This? Huh? Yeah. No, man. You think you want your people to live on my day?
The chairman of committee is reporting the passing of one bill with amendments in committee.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The question is the aforementioned bill be read a third time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg that this bill be now, do now pass and be cited as the Appropriations Act 2020.
This is the Rose family.
The question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
You like that? You're supposed to be getting more. Yeah, to next Friday. Oh, it- That's his point, and you understand? But I will do anything. They need to be able to move these. We don't have these subheads.
We commit of government notices here. Give notice of. We amended the figure.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of a resolution to grant the sum of $103,639,742 from the Consolidated Fund and to place it at the disposal of the government to supplement the estimates 2019-2020 as shown in supplementary estimates number 16, 2019-2020.
Government business resume, sir. Order number 15, in the name of the Honorable Leader of the House, to move that the House resolve itself into Standing Finance Committee to consider the grant of sums of money for the service of this island.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and that the House resolve itself into Standing Finance Committee.
Question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into Standing Finance Committee. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
In the name of the Honorable Leader of the House, to move the passing of a resolution to grant the sum of $103,689,742, $639,000 from the Consolidated Fund, and to place it at the disposal of the government to supplement the estimates 2019 to 2020 as shown in the supplementary estimates number 16, 2019 to 2020, which form the schedule to the resolution. Head 12, Parliament, in the amount of $2,311,970.
Mr. Chair, thanks very much. The sum, as you're aware, sir, Parliament had to relocate to this location, and we have just concluded the estimates process, and therefore the sums of monies being requested under this particular head reflects the increased costs associated with those activities, and therefore this particular provision allows for the Parliament to be able to settle some of those expenditures. So therefore, with that, sir, I beg to move that Head 12 stand part.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I cannot, in all good conscience, support the vote being requested as indicated in the amounts here under Head 12. And I'm rather disappointed that in the explanation as to the costs to be covered by this expenditure, it is told to the Honorable House that this covers the cost of relocating the Parliament to this site. I am made to understand, in fact, that these monies go beyond that project of relocation of the Parliament, and feel as a member of this chamber that I am being seriously misled when the explanation given as to why these monies are to be voted, that explanation is limited to the cost of relocating the Parliament of Barbados to this venue. Several months ago, the Honorable Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, by her own words, speaking as the political leader of the Barbados Labour Party, I think it was at Queen's Park, indicated that with respect to the annual political subvention given to political parties in Barbados represented in this chamber, that not a red cent would go to the People's Party for Democracy and Development. PDP, People's Party. One may sit if one so desires, or stand if one prefers, and seek to make fun of that matter. It is not a trivial matter. I think it is very inappropriate for the head of a political party to stand in a party's convention and to suggest that with respect to a subvention which is the subject of the discretion of the Parliament of Barbados, that not one red cent of that. The honorable member was not speaking as Prime Minister. She was not speaking as Minister of Finance. In her own words, she said, I am speaking now to you today as your political leader. It is highly inappropriate, in my view, for any political leader of any political party, notwithstanding the numbers that that party may have in Parliament, on the floor of a partisan conference, to suggest in those terms sounded very instructive. And by instructive, I mean it seems that orders were being given that not one red cent was to go to the PDP. If I remember correctly, the words used, you bust luck, Joe, not one red cent. I think that's highly inappropriate. That is one thing. The honorable member who now stands on his feet is not here because he's interested in money. The honorable member who now stands to his feet and is addressing you, Mr. Chairman, is here because he believes that there is a duty to be performed, that in the interest of the Parliament of Barbados as an institution of the highest integrity, in the interest of Barbadian people, there was an office which was critical and necessary to be filled, functions to be served in the interest of the Barbadian people, and that is why he's standing here, not in the pursuit of money. I have served in the public sphere, if I may so deem it, and I speak.
On the point of order, sir. Mr. Chairman, I rise on a point of order because the honourable member has misled this House. I am satisfied he also has violated the rules against repetition. But that is not the substantive point. The leader of this government, sir, when she spoke on the floor of the Barbados Labour Party's annual conference, referred to a matter within a certain context. And even though the leader of the opposition has, as I understand it, now moved away from that particular point, he has not given the benefit of the context to this House. The leader of the government, sir, made it very clear that there is a criteria for a political party to get the benefits to which the honourable leader of the opposition refers, and that that the party that he leads does not meet or did not meet that criteria. And to the extent that the leader of the opposition has failed to give us the fair accounting of that which was said, but has chosen, unfortunately in my view, to omit that criteria from his speech in here tonight. To that extent, sir, he has misled this House.
Mr. Chairman, if in fact the honourable member for St. Michael North East, being the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance at a partisan conference, did not speak, in her own words, as the political leader of the party and not as Prime Minister, then I have misled the House. If the honorable member for St. Michael Northeast, in that partisan context, did not say that the only reason why there is a PDP today is because some persons were told that that is the way you get $150,000, then I have misled the House. But if these things are true, I have not in any way misled the House. And I want to put this on record too, because I have heard it suggested by other voices, both in and outside of here, who have the benefit of the public ears. They refer to him sometimes as Bishop Joe. They refer sometimes to him as Bishop Atherley. They refer sometimes to him as Joe Atherley. None of those guys, and I know all of them, is moved and motivated by any interest principally related to money or material benefit. As I was saying before, I was interrupted by the honorable member for St. James in his customary manner. I have served in the public, St. James Central. I have served in the public space, Mr. Speaker, while all my work, Mr. Chairman, while all my working years working at a job. I have served the church and the people of Barbados and communities all across Barbados, leading a church here, leading our denomination in the region for the past 14 years or so, without demanding of any of those two organizations, the one here, the one across the region, a red cent, to use familiar language, Mr. Chair. I have always resisted, at the behest of my church board administration, that I be paid for my service. I have always been contented to be of the view that my wife works and I work, and I do not need to depend upon the offerings that come from people's pockets. So I know what it is to serve sacrificially and in a selfless manner. I am not motivated by money principally. I have never, as a leader of that organization, charged a red cent of anybody for my services. For my services, whether I am burying the dead or marrying the living or blessing their children who have now come into the world. I am not motivated by material considerations, desire for money. But yet I hear that he has formed a party because he's interested in $150,000. I have heard it said, Mr. Chairman, I have heard it said, Mr. Chairman, that this is by reputable journalists. He works for the second highest salary in the Parliament and the government of Barbados, and that is why he has crossed the floor. A majority of Barbadians do not know that that is far distant from the truth, and that the leader of the opposition is among the least paid persons in this whole structure. But that's beside the point. I have heard it said by those who are prominent in the public areas with respect to political commentary that Joe Atherley gets the you hear the figure, the $250,000 subvention, not $150,000. You know, I saw it in the Nation of recent publication that the $150,000 subvention does not now go to the Democratic Labour Party because they're not represented in Parliament. It goes to Joe Atherley. People who know better or who ought to know better say these things. And so, when the Minister of Finance or the Honorable Prime Minister, speaking in the capacity as political leader in a partisan context, suggests not one red cent, Joe, you bust luck. And the reason why the PDP was formed was to get a political subvention. I take serious offense at that and have to use this opportunity to set the record straight. Mr. Speaker, I want to make it clear and abundantly clear that neither Joe Athley nor the PDP has received 1 red cent in any political subvention in 2018, in 2019, nor in 2020. Not a single red cent. I want to make that clear. I have to say that I heard it expressed, and publicly so, that the People's Party for Democracy and Development, once a signal was sent to the Parliament of Barbados that that organization was constitutionally established, that entity would qualify for the subvention. I formally wrote to ask what was the position. I was advised, and here is my serious beef, I was advised by the Management Commission of this Parliament, of which I am a member, that the PDP does not qualify. That's one thing. I asked for documented evidence to suggest that that was the case. I was given a document, in my view, of questionable validity. There was no signature. It was dated 1997, and it dealt, among other matters, with the matter of a political subvention. I have never been fully persuaded as to the legitimacy of the document from this perspective. That is, that what the document purports to suggest has in fact been the practice all along. That is what I'm saying. I'm not saying that I was given a bogus document. I'm saying I was given a document. There was no signature. It was dated 1997. It related to other matters. And I have never been fully persuaded.
On a point of privilege, Mr. Chairman, the honourable member is not a novitiate member of this House. The honourable member must know better. And on a point of privilege is what I'm raising, sir, because, sir, we cannot have a member come to this House and impugn the integrity of a committee of the House, of which he's a part, sir, on the floor of the Parliament, if that honourable member has not followed channels that would facilitate complaint or expression of any of the things that he's raising here before. And the honourable member must know that this is an improper way of dealing with the business of the House. He is, in effect, dragging the reputation of this honourable chamber into disrepute.
Well, if the honourable member, Mr. Chairman, thinks that I have so far impugned the integrity of this chamber, he has not heard anything yet, because I'm not done. He has not heard anything yet, because I am not done. And let me make it.
Order, please. Order, please. Continue.
And let me make it pellucidly clear to you, Mr. Chairman, and I hope I have your ears.
Yes, you do, sir.
If those of no one else, I hope I have your ears.
Continue.
I'm trying to suggest to you that I was advised by the Management Commission of this Honorable House, an entity of which I am a member, that the PDP did not qualify. That's one thing. I don't have a problem with that. Show me the evidence as to how this thing is supposed to work. And I was presented with a document of questionable validity, dated 1997, unsigned. And the point I am making is that my understanding with reference to practice was not what was represented in that document. I can only tell you what I understand. I am further, really, I want to choose my words. I respect the integrity of this institution. I respect the integrity of this institution. but I have to let you, Mr. Chairman, know the facts as I see it. I am really, it abhors, it is abhorrent. My strong view is I was lied to. You hearing me, Mr. Chairman? I was lied to as a member, an honorable member of the Management Commission of this Parliament. I was lied to by the Management Commission.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for St. Joseph.
This really is, this goes way beyond the pale. The Management Commission of Parliament is a subcommittee of Parliament. It is governed by the standing orders. Every standing committee of Parliament is acting at the instance of the Speaker and his powers. In order for the honourable member to say that he was lied to by the Management Commission of Parliament, he's in effect saying that a committee of Parliament lied to him and engaged in unparliamentary conduct. And I think that he ought to withdraw. If he doesn't withdraw it, it should be struck from the record, and the honourable member should first carry his issue back to the Commission or raise the matter in an appropriate way with the Speaker. But he is attributing not only dishonourable, but dishonest conduct to members of this chamber in the course of the execution of their duties as parliamentarians. I not only take offence at it, but I believe, sir, that if he thinks that this committee has lied to him, then he's in effect asking this chamber to bring a charge against the committee, and that has to be dealt with by a committee of the whole House. It cannot be dealt with by this particular committee. I would ask Mr. Chairman if you would direct the honourable member to deal with the resolution that is before the chamber and nothing more. And apart from that, I am quite sure that his 15 minutes is now long past.
Honourable member for St. Michael West. I have heard your comments and the response on the member for St. Joseph. And I have also consulted with the clerk of the House for guidance on this matter. As you would appreciate, I'm not the substantive holder of this chairmanship. But I do believe that to use the words or to language it that you were lied to would be improper. And I would therefore advise you, sir, to withdraw those remarks.
But Mr. Chairman, you can have them struck from the record if you would.
All right, well,
But on the point of order, Mr. Speaker, you know, I don't know.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I am loath to engage in this. While you are chairman of committees, you are presiding over this chamber. You, sir, may direct that it be struck from the record, but you may also direct the honourable member to withdraw it. If the honourable member chooses contumeliously or contemptuously not to withdraw it, then, sir, you have the power of discipline over him. But this is not somebody doing the homework. This is not somebody being detained by a prefect. The honourable member has to respect this chamber, and I think that he's being grossly disrespectful.
Thank you. Honourable member for St. Joseph, I did indicate to the honourable member for St. Michael West that he has to withdraw. And if the honourable member fails to withdraw, of course, the matter will be struck from the record. So, honourable member, you've advised us that, are you going to withdraw your remarks, or please confirm, and I would advise you accordingly.
Mr. Chair, so I'm clear in your instructions. I'm clear as to your instructions. I must withdraw the remarks, or you will have them struck from the record.
I didn't get that option.
Are you withdrawing the remarks? Sir?
I want to be clear, Mr. Chairman, on your instructions.
No.
I
All right,
have to
all right.
withdraw.
Honourable member.
I have to withdraw the
Yeah,
statement,
okay.
or you will have them struck from
No,
the record.
no. I would be, Mr. Honourable member. I am asking that you withdraw the remarks. I'm directing you to withdraw the remarks.
At your instructions, I withdraw those remarks that the Management Commission of...
Sir, this is no childish.
Hold
This
on.
is no childish.
Honourable
This
member.
is being broadcast.
Honourable
The honourable
member.
member is being completely disrespectful. All he needs to say is, I withdraw the remarks. But to repeat the remarks in the process of withdrawing it is like me calling somebody something vile and libelous and being asked to apologize. I then say, I apologize for calling you that which caused the offense in the first place. The honourable member must not be allowed to do this. He must not.
Honourable member, are you... Withdraw. Honourable member, Sir Michael West, please.
Mr. Chairman, at your instruction, I withdraw the offensive words that the Management Commission...
Sir, we are going to be here all night.
Hold on.
We're going to be here all night. Mr. Chairman, you need to discipline this member.
Just 1 second. Yeah. Mr. Honourable member, you will have to withdraw remarks and
Without repeating
And
the
not
words.
without repeating them,
without
yes.
repeating the remarks.
Mr. Chairman, at your instruction, I withdraw the offensive words.
Thank you, sir.
But may I say to you, Mr. Chairman, if I may be allowed to proceed, that having presented this matter to the Management Commission of Parliament, I was advised that the PDP, People's Party of Democracy Development, did not qualify for the subvention. And I was giving a document whose validity I found personally subject to question. But that's not my point, ultimately.
You're repeating it often enough.
And here, further pursuing the discussion within the context of the Management Commission of Parliament, Mr. Chairman, I ask this question. The subvention was provided for in 2018. There were two parties represented in the Parliament of Barbados in 2018, after May, the BLP and the PDP. The PDP in 2018 did not benefit from any parliamentary subvention. The DLP was not represented there and therefore did not benefit from any subvention. My question was, did the Barbados Labour Party receive the total subvention?
I remember you have 1 minute left, sir.
After all those interruptions, Mr. Chair,
No, I did give you allowance. I did.
I asked the same question relative to 2019. What became of the subvention? Did the Barbados Labour Party get the totals? I was told no. I have subsequently seen a document produced by the administrative wing of this Parliament which showed that, in fact, the Barbados Labour Party got all. Mr. Chairman,
On a point of order,
Mr.
sir.
Chairman,
On a point of order, sir. On a point of order, sir.
Honourable member, St. James Central.
Better yet, Mr. Chairman, on a point of privilege, I must invoke my privilege as a member of the House, of which I am a part. And Mr. Chairman, sir, this is again a slur on the House. The honourable member is part of a committee chaired by the Speaker of this honourable House, His Honour the Speaker, no less. If the honourable member had seen this document to which he purports, the honourable member has it within his remit to have reduced into writing his complaint, given the Speaker of this House and Chairman of the committee to which he refers an opportunity to deal with the matter, produce, if need be, if he's unsatisfied, bring it to this House by way of laying as a document of this House that particular complaint that he's making. But to stand there in his place, sir, and make a vague and vacant allegation, which stains the credibility of the Speaker, the House, the whole process of which he's a part, Mr. Speaker, sir, and to impugn also the party in government, which is really what his intention is, Mr. Speaker, sir, is most, Mr. Chairman, is most improper. It is most improper. And the honourable member must be asked to strike, to withdraw all of that and have it struck from the record.
Honourable member for St. Michael West, please wrap. You have about 30 seconds left.
And as I was saying, I was told that the Barbados Party did not benefit from the full subvention. When this subject matter came before me as a member of the Management Commission, that is, requesting my approval of a resolution to go to the Cabinet, I said I will not approve that because it includes a subvention, the reference to a subvention to be gotten by supplementary, which I am not going to agree with, having been told what I was told in the Management Commission. Mr. Chairman, I am simply saying it could not have been in the intention of the framers of this measure that any single party benefit from that full subvention. And if the PDP cannot get it, give it to the Democratic Labour Party. But the Barbados Labour Party should not be entitled to all of it. That's what I'm saying. And I deplore the fact that I was misled by the Management Commission.
Honourable member, your time has expired. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I thank you too.
Honourable member for Christchurch East Central.
Mr. Chair, this has been a very enlightening exchange because you would recall, sir, that one, the member is certainly sits on the Management Committee, and prior to the election of 2018, you would too, sir, recall that there was the former member for Christchurch West appeared to have aligned with what I think was the UPP, and at that very time, sir, this discussion about the very subvention and whether or not that particular activity would activate some portion with respect to the allowance that goes to political parties. But it is clear, Mr. Chair, that any of us in this chamber could decide tomorrow that we are going to break away.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Point of order, Mr. Chairman. The honourable member for Christchurch East is misrepresenting me and misleading this chamber. I am not concerned about any subvention for PDP, long past that. My concern is this: it could never have been in the intention of those who introduced this measure to support political parties operating in this democracy that one party gets all of the money, and I deplore the fact that I was told that that was not the case when it seems that it was. Deal with that.
Honourable member for Christchurch East Central.
Deal with that.
Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. Order, please.
Mr. Speaker, I believe that the people of this country is the ultimate parliament. And if the people of the country determine that one political party should come to this place, given the rules of the chamber, then it makes perfect sense that if a party fields candidates in elections, sir, and those candidates, 1, 2, 3, all 30, sir, happen to occupy this space, that whatever the allocation to support political parties is on the basis, sir, that you have actually contested an election. And the public of Barbados has given their confidence in you, and therefore on that basis, sir, it isn't a matter of whether the Barbados Labour Party should get all, sir. The reality is that the public determine by their votes, sir, who should get the subvention. And therefore, if the PDP or any other party had presented themselves to the public of Barbados, and the public being the ultimate parliament, sir, determines that they want to say all of the Barbados Labour Party or all of the PDP or whatever it is, sir, that is the judgment of the people of Barbados. But let me move on, sir. This particular supplementary for the parliament, sir, the honourable member for St. Michael West is a part of the Management Commission. He understands why this request is here, sir, and therefore I'm not going to prolong this any further. So, sir, I beg to move that this head stand part.
Second that, sir.
The question is that Head 12, do stand part. All members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, Head 36, Ministry of Energy and Water Resources. Right. There's no Head 15. Take it now. Yeah. Head 36, Ministry of Energy and Water Resources, in the amount of 20,300,000. That's why the figure is reducing.
The honourable member for Christchurch East Central.
Mr. Chairman, the sums of money being requested under this head, $20,300,000, relates to a loan, sir, that the government of Barbados has with the Caribbean Development Bank, which is being executed by the Barbados Water Authority. Barbadians certainly over the course of the last year, sir, would have seen a number of responses with respect to the Water Authority being able to improve, sir, some of the mains infrastructure, despite, sir, the fact that there were some challenges. And therefore, this particular supplementary represents, sir, 2 disbursements of that specific loan. The money has already been executed, and therefore this request here just simply, in a sense, sir, just administratively tidies up the fact that these sums of money have been disbursed. The Water Authority will continue, sir, under the Mains Lane program, and as the Prime Minister articulated in her address before, and being able to ensure that we improve certainly the supply of water, especially, sir, to those northern parts of the country, the more rural parts of the country, sir. And whilst we are not where we would like to be, the Water Authority continues, sir, through the support of the financing that is being provided to improve the delivery of water services to a large number of Barbadians. And so therefore this particular request this evening, as I said, is more of an administrative matter, but those Mains Lane programs, sir, will continue, and therefore we want to ensure that Barbadians, especially at this time, as it is required, sir, certainly for fighting and containing the spread of the COVID, we will continue, sir, to support accelerate where possible, sir, with respect to the replacement of mains and to ensuring that Barbadians have access to clean, quality water, especially at this very critical time, to be able to ensure that we can contain the spread of COVID. So, Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Head 36 in the sum of $20,300,000 stand part.
Beg to second that, sir. The question is that Head 36 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Head 80, Ministry of Transport Works and Maintenance, in the amount of $6,700,000.
Honourable member for Christchurch East Central.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the sum being requested represents, again, sir, similarly, the government's commitment to improving the access to buses and improving transportation services in the country. As you are fully aware, sir, this money represents the deposit that we would have made specifically as it relates to the acquisition of the electric buses, which, as the Prime Minister indicated in her speech, given the disruption in China with respect to the production process, that the delivery time now has been delayed slightly because of the lockdown and the impact of COVID. And so therefore this particular sum of money here represents the monies that we've already paid with respect to the funds to improve the bus fleet for the Transport Board. Of course, sir, during the course of, as buses are delivered, we will pay the remainder with respect to of the fees associated with the acquisition of these buses. And so therefore, sir, I beg to move that Head 80 stand part.
Better second that, sir.
And I can join you in confirming to this honourable chamber that the communities in Barbados have seen an improvement in the bus service in Barbados. And for that, we are grateful. Question is that Head 80 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Head 86, Ministry of Health and Wellness in the amount of $71,576,136.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, this supplementary before the chamber really does reflect the government's absolute commitment, sir, to ensuring that all of what we can deploy by way of financial resources, sir, that we put certainly the minister and his team within the Ministry of Health to be capable of responding totally, sir, with respect to containing the impact of COVID-19 in Barbados. And as you would recall, sir, last week, Monday, we voted $8.8 million as a first tranche with respect to being able to put the ministry in a position to ramp up certainly their testing capability, which they have been able to certainly to do. But the money's being sought after here, sir, as you would have heard certainly the Prime Minister and even the Minister indicating to the country that works have already started with respect to building out the facilities, certainly at Harrison Point, as well as across the other centers, both at Paragon as well as in St. Lucie. And therefore, part of the supplementary here this evening, sir, represents what will be the payments for those construction activities. There's also payments with respect, sir, to deploying equipment specifically to deal with outfitting some of those facilities, sir. Also, sir, we have made a determination, as the Prime Minister has indicated in her speech to wrap up the appropriations bill, given the issues related to logistics and the uncertainty around accessibility with respect to drugs, we've taken the decision, sir, under the drug service to be capable of being able to procure at least 6 months with respect to drugs so that all Barbadians, and this is not drugs only related to helping to deal with COVID-19, but as the Prime Minister articulated and as we have sought strategically as a country, sir, is to try to ensure that over the course of the period of time that we may be disrupted, that we separate as much as possible, sir, the normal provisioning for healthcare in this country from the traditional healthcare systems, so that we isolate as far as possible, sir, the QEH, as well as the polyclinics, as well as the normal GP offices, sir, away from the impact of that. And therefore, basic drugs that are required for when persons are ill, sir, monies are made available here under the drug service, sir, to deal specifically with that, as well as the QEH, to allow for us to be capable of dealing with the normal healthcare needs of Barbadians over the course of the next 6 months. And as you know, sir, a lot of countries have started to make strategic decisions about what they do, and therefore Barbados has to be in a position to ensure that we can continue to supply ordinary Barbadians who get ill as they will normally do, COVID or no COVID, sir, to be capable of being able to be treated either at the QEH, at the polyclinics, or certainly across any of the private pharmacies in the country. And so 7.8 million, as the Prime Minister indicated earlier, sir, is specifically related to the drug service. 5 million will be for the private polyclinics, and 15 million will be for the Queen Elizabeth Hospital with respect to that. There are certainly, sir, monies in here to deal with ensuring that we have acquisition of ventilators. We've also advanced, in a sense, sir, the procurement with respect to some of the critical equipment that the hospital has not had for some time, sir. And therefore, we felt it was important that we deal with that strategically now to ensure that not just as a response to COVID-19, but that we fast-track the hospital's ability, certainly, sir, to be capable of response with respect to this crisis. But, sir, this is the government's absolute commitment, as it started at the beginning, sir, to help support the improvement, of the delivery of health care in the country, but certainly with respect to putting the Ministry of Health in a position to be capable, sir, of containing the spread of the COVID virus in Barbados, and to ensure that Barbadians will have access to the best possible health care that we can provide at this time. And with those few words, sir, I beg to move that Head 86 stand part.
Second. The question is that Head 86 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Head 89, Ministry of Small Business and Entrepreneurship, in the amount of $2,751,636.
Honourable Member Christchurch East Central.
Yes, sir. The sums of money under this head reflect two things, sir. As you know, we were experiencing some challenges, certainly coming into office, with respect to the provision of transport services in this country. And we engaged in the expansion or the introduction of the TAP program, sir. And so therefore the $2.5 million that is being requested here was to provide financing to some of the former transport board workers to procure buses, sir, such that they can augment, which as you are well aware, sir, that they can augment the existing fleet of the transport board in order to ensure that ordinary Barbadians can get to and fro, whether for work or leisure or whatever business that they had to undertake. The $2.5 million that is here, sir, a dividend was declared from the Industrial Credit Fund, and therefore this just is a matter of accounting for the fact that the monies have gone to fund access, and this is just for us to be able to account for the fact that we've done that with respect to the financing. The $251,636 for the BNSI, sir, is to assist the BNSI in being able to complete their financial obligations between now and the end of the financial year, and therefore this is a standard for standard supplementary requests with respect to the BNSI. And so, sir, I beg to move that Head 89 stand part.
The question is that Head 89 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one money resolution in Standing Finance Committee.
I beg to second that, sir.
The question is, I do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one money resolution in the Standing Finance Committee. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees is reporting the passing of one money resolution in committee. Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the bill be read a first time, the resolution be read a first time.
The question is that the aforementioned resolution be read a first time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the resolution be read a second time.
The question is that the aforementioned resolution be read a second time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the resolution be now agreed to.
The question is that the aforementioned resolution be agreed to. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I believe that has brought us to the end of the estimates debate. In speaking on the adjournment, sir, it has been a long, tiresome, grueling 3 weeks. And prior to actually being in this chamber, sir, we have had, I think all honorable ministers have had the opportunity to prepare for these estimates, which no doubt has taken a further, perhaps another month out of our lives as well, sir. I want to take this opportunity to thank all honorable members who spoke, including the honorable leader of the opposition as well. I want to say to this chamber, sir, that we have been here over the past few weeks in perhaps what has been an unprecedented moment in the history of Barbados, and certainly indeed the world. And I believe that we have demonstrated that while we may come to this chamber and certainly to the public of Barbados with one set of documents to chart the way forward for this government, we have also recognized that there are external circumstances that will impact on what we do as a government. And I think we have demonstrated to the country that ministry by ministry and with the leadership of the current Prime Minister, that we've been able to respond to the challenges that have confronted us in the course of the past 3 weeks, sir. I want to take the opportunity to thank the Leader of the Opposition for his criticisms at times. I believe he has been naughty at times as well and provoking members, certainly on this side as well. I understand the honourable member well. I don't always agree with him, sir, but I do feel that his heart started in Labour, and I believe his heart will certainly end in Labour, regardless of what he may now be doing. Sir, these estimates could not come together without the hard work of a number of persons, and I think I can take the opportunity on behalf of all honourable members to thank all of our permanent secretaries, our heads of department, all of the staff, I'm sure personal assistants, constituency assistants, and even constituents who have been able to bear with us in this difficult process of preparation and certainly absence away from constituencies to do the people's business. You know, I was receiving messages and calls of persons saying that members look tired, they're concerned about members, and I want to say, sir, that I would rather that we look tired than that we look like we have been fattening ourselves off of the public purse. I think it is fair to say that all members are tired, we are exhausted, but we understand and we understood what we were up against when we came to office. We understood that it was not going to be an opportunity to rape the public purse. We understood that it was going to be sleepless nights and directives from a leader of this party, sir, that has been giving us a certain level of guidance that has been outstanding. I really want to take this opportunity as well to thank the honourable leader of this party, because I don't think that without the energy that she has displayed and the focus and the foresight that she has displayed for the cabinet and certainly for the entire Barbados, that we could be where we are today with a clear vision of what it is that we have to do. This crisis, sir, has taken us a bit off track. It has not caused us in any way, I believe, to lose focus, and I want to reassure Barbadians that we are in good hands with the leadership that we have. I take the view that when I heard the Honourable Member for St. Michael South speak earlier, that I could not imagine going through this crisis with the former representative for St. Michael South. I honestly couldn't, because while people may be critical of the amount of press conferences that the Honourable Leader has had and how many times she talks to the country, I remember Barbados when there was nobody talking to us. There was nobody explaining to us what was happening. And people felt as though they were ignored, that they weren't armed with the information upon which to know whether they were going to be able to move from one opportunity to the next and were living from paycheck to paycheck, sir. And I feel comfortable tonight that despite all that this country is going through, despite all that we are facing across the world, that we have a leadership of this country that recognizes what lies ahead, is not afraid to be able to take us all on the journey with her, to be able to transform Barbados, even in the face of a crisis, sir. And I'm grateful to be part of a cabinet of persons who, and also our backbenchers who also share, and the senators who also share in the wider vision of what Barbados used to be, but also what Barbados can become once again. So while it may seem that we have had to start again from the start of the race, I am comfortable that all is not lost, sir, and that the plans that we have put in place, the outstanding work that you've seen by several ministers trying to keep this ship afloat, is testimony to the fact that we are in good hands in terms of our leadership. And certainly I know Barbados is a praying country. It is one where I think all of us know, well, whether it's a disaster that is coming or not, we always know that we put our lives and our hands in God, and we pray for us to be able to get through whatever difficulty together. Sir, we could not be in this chamber for the last couple of weeks unless we had as well all of the persons at the head table here, the clerks of Parliament, all of the staff that support us, or yourself, Mr. Speaker, the Deputy Chair, the Chairman of Committees. We wouldn't be here without all of the staff that have supported us, the Royal Barbados Police Force that has been here protecting us, all of the personnel downstairs who have basically ensured our safety and certainly have been vigilant over us for the time that we've been here. Sir, we took the decision to move to this location, and I want to thank the persons who have so hosted us here at this particular complex. It is not as historic as the House of Parliament and filled with the traditions, but I think we all appreciate as a chamber that when we come together to do the people's business, if we have to do it in this place or in the other place, or if we have to do it as a cabinet from home, doing it virtually, we are all prepared to do what we signed up for in the name of the people, sir. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this sitting be adjourned until next Friday, the 27th of March at 10 a.m.
The question is that this honorable chamber be adjourned until the 27th day of March at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands adjourned until the 27th day of March at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.